One of the main events of the day, big press conference of Russian foreign minister. Its theme was the results of activities of Russian diplomacy in 2016. But all, of course, interested in, said Sergei Lavrov regarding events already this year. Them for a couple of weeks there have been already many and they provide much food for thought. 2017 has the potential to become a year of big changes in international politics. The final press conference, Sergei Lavrov, lasted 2 hours and 8 minutes, and that's the detail, talking about how big interest in representatives of other states to Russian foreign policy, in the hall a little, but still more foreign journalists than Russia. More than 90 correspondents from the country and more than 100 foreign, among them the representatives of China, Syria, Turkey, and Iran, of course, a lot of journalists from Europe. One of the first questions from a Syrian journalist on the most discussing the topic of foreign policy, on the possible change of relations between Russia and the United States after the inauguration of Donald Trump. Sergei Lavrov expressed hope for productive cooperation. The two countries have many important problems to solve, for example, nuclear safety, the fight against terrorism. The Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia positively estimates the statement Trump that the main foreign policy threat to America is terrorism. In this our positions, according to Lavrov, echoed. Hopes for the settlement of the Syrian crisis related to a future meeting in Astana. There is, in addition to the parties to the conflict, representatives of the opposition and Syrian government, and the mediators, Russia, Turkey, and Iran. We believe that meeting the right to invite UN representatives and representatives of the new administration of the United States, given that the meeting will be held November 23, as is currently scheduled. We hope that the new administration will be able to accept this invitation, will be represented by their experts at any level which it believes to be possible. This will be the first official contact in which you can begin to discuss improving the effectiveness of the fight against terrorism in Syria, said Sergei Lavrov. But with the outgoing administration, it was different. Sergei Lavrov said in recent times has increased the pressure on Russian diplomats, who perform their duty abroad, and gave several examples that were not previously in the public domain. In April last year, the diplomat, senior American intelligence agencies, trying to make recruiting offers that are literally stuck in the car in his absence to $10,000 with offer of cooperation. The money was capitalized. If anyone is interested in our accounting department, they are now working for the benefit of the Russian state. I'm not talking about the fact that in addition to espionage staff, diplomats of the Embassy of the United States, have repeatedly been seen participating in rallies of our opposition, in anti-government rallies, in unauthorized rallies, including in Periodata. Do the findings themselves, as they say, said the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation. The foreign minister also said it is a especially cynical and blatant attempt to recruit an employee of the Russian consulate, who came to the doctor to get paid in advance medicine for Yevgeny Primakov. A journalist from Germany asked Lavrov how he can prove that Russia poses no threats. He explained that this issue is being discussed in Germany before the election. What the head of Russian diplomacy said, it would not prove that all the accusations against Russia are lies. In Germany, as in many other states, the presumption of innocence, he who accuses must provide evidence. According to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, while all attempts discredit only those who speak an outright lie. BBC reported that in the United States it established the Central Intelligence Agency Special Counterintelligence Group, which has long been investigating alleged financial ties Trump with Russia. This group also includes the CIA, the FBI, the National Security Agency, Office of the Director of National Intelligence, the Ministry of Justice, Ministry of Finance. That they are still collecting evidence that we, Russia, have financial ties with Trump, or he has with us these links. If the whole team respected institutions have got only what they are now dumped on public display, They clearly deserve to be fired from their positions, because nothing gets their salary. They're worthless in this case, so that you can explain and prove that we're innocent. I'm not going, said Sergei Lavrov. German journalists asked Lavrov and Personal, don't feel sad for him that John Kerry and Frank-Walter Steinmeier leave their posts. The head of Russian diplomacy wished them success. A significant part of the European press, accustomed to the old rules of the so-called Euro-Atlantic Partnership, that is, to an obedient adherence to the course prescribed by Washington, is in a state of grog. With the arrival of Trump became possible global changes in the ideological universe that is fraught with serious stress. It's hard to remember that someone from the American presidents before taking office aroused so many emotions. Donald Trump has not yet had time to enter the White House, and already he was attacked with such fury that he turned the world upside down. I find it unacceptable, as the President-elect of the United States so straightforward interfere in politics of other states, said U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry. What did Donald Trump? He just said in an interview with the British Times and the German Bild that the Angela Merkel's open-door policy towards migrants is a mistake. And that NATO is an outdated organization. And it got a rebuke from the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Germany, and along with the French president. Very touched that a future American leader supported the choice of Britons who voted in favor of leaving the EU. I assure you, Europe always ready to continue transatlantic cooperation, but will act according to their interests and values. We don't need advice about what to do, said François Hollande. In Britain, the Trump attack are not politicians, and journalists. Broadcaster the BBC has issued a 30-minute film investigation with the telling title Trump, the candidate of the Kremlin? And although in the end of a phrase or a question mark, it all starts with the following passage, did Vladimir Putin trump to be the White House? It's definitely the most serious blow to our democracy since Watergate, the former acting director of the CIA, John McLachlan. Everything that comes later is a documentary in name only. The author of the film, the journalist John Sweeney, I am convinced that the future union of Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, although it is not clear if they can find common language at all, destructive for Western democracy. A set of old charges. Russian hackers helped the latter to win the election and discredit the competitors, and the Russian mafia to obtain lucrative contracts. If you're dealing with large business groups in Moscow, you will end up faced with international crime, says the author of the book Between East and West by N. Applebaum. When such statements, no evidence. Even the so-called specialist on Russian hackers carefully choosing his words. Looking at the evidence, as it is written, these programs, and they can be identified in previous hacker attacks, looking at the evidence, it gives us serious grounds to think that it was Russian intelligence, says senior specialist technology company CrowdStrike Dmitry Alperovich. The filmmakers could not recall the so-called Russian blackmail to Trump. The other day he gave a former employee of British intelligence MI6 the truth of the dossier in question, but did explain, so sure was. They say that Russian intelligence was removed as a Trump in a Moscow hotel was partying with prostitutes. There is no evidence of this, but it's possible. Attached to this expert opinion. Most hotel rooms have bugs, who write the sound. But even if no bugs, surveillance is means, installed outside the room, says Malcolm Nance, a former intelligence officer with the U.S. Navy. If the movie BBC reflect the official point of view, it is not clear what counts British politicians, wishing to establish friendly relations with the new American administration. Foreign Minister of Britain, Boris Johnson is confident that America will sign the first trade agreements with Britain that leaves the EU. but the British led Trump to himself while does not admit. The first meeting with Theresa May is scheduled in February. Although immediately after the election Trump was hosted in the residence of a political opponent of the Prime Minister, the leader of the British Independence Party Nigel Farage. Trump even offered to make him ambassador to America. Maybe it's someone hurt.
In the UK today held the first meeting of the High Court of London in the case of the state debt of Ukraine to Russia. We are talking about a loan of $3 billion, which, through the purchase of bonds, was provided at the end of 2013. The people who came to power in Ukraine after the coup in 2014, refused to recognize the sovereign debt and in the ultimate order demanded the cancellation of the debt. Russia, trying to find a way out, offered Kiev to pay the debt in installments, in 3 equal tranches until 2018. In response, Ukraine has ceased to serve a debt and refused to negotiate a settlement. According to the plan, the case in the High Court of London will be considered until Friday. Moscow asks to hold hearings on an expedited basis. The question of how sessions will be held, will decide in the first place. Sovereign, in other words, the state status of the debt previously recognized and the International Monetary Fund, at this point, the main creditor of Kiev, thanks to the tranches which the country keeps its budget.
Arrested on suspicion of committing a terrorist act in the nightclub of Istanbul New Year's Eve pleaded guilty. This was announced by the mayor of the city. A native of Uzbekistan, was taken into custody after the raid. He actually was hiding under noses of police in one of the districts in the European part of the city in the apartment of a friend. Together with him were detained 4 more people, a man and 3 women. It is reported that on the territory of Turkey, the suspect entered illegally about a year ago, military training in terrorist camps in Afghanistan. The fact that he shot the visitors of the Club Reyna, confirmed the fingerprints found at the crime scene. Also, the authorities believe undeniable his connection with the band in Russia and many other countries by the Islamic State, which has claimed responsibility for the attack. Armed with a gun is a terrorist in the New Year night broke into a nightclub on the Bosporus and opened fire on the visitors. 39 people died, including a Russian citizen. The number of victims of wreck of a cargo Boeing, which the day before fell on houses near the airport of Bishkek, has increased to 38 people. In the morning discovered the body of the 4th crew member. The operations involved hundreds of rescuers and employees of the Interior Ministry, as well as buses. In particular, for the second black box, which will help to establish the cause of the tragedy. In the near future, work must begin. Experts of the Interstate Aviation Committee then begin to remove large pieces of the plane, which, as previously reported, may be another victim. As for versions, is now considered different causes of the crash, including pilot error. At the same time, today the Interior Ministry has officially declared a terrorist attack on board is excluded. Today, in Kyrgyzstan, a day of mourning. At all institutions, and diplomatic missions abroad half-mast. In Moscow to the embassy, bring flowers.